Hi everyone, and welcome to the Big Book Compendium, Big Book Study. My name is Tuya, recovered alcoholic. Let's do a moment of silence, followed by the set-aside prayer. God, please help me set aside everything I know, everything I think I know about you, about me, about my fellow man, about the 12 steps, and please allow me to gain a fresh new vision, perspective, and understanding of what you, what me, what my fellow man, and the 12 steps are all about. Amen. Big Book Compendium is not affiliated with AA, CA, DAA, or any other 12-step organisation, nor are we bound to any fellowship by association. Our groups are bound together in the love we all share for the Big Book and the program of recovery contained in it. We are simply a virtual fellowship hall where all are welcome, regardless of their addiction or imperfections. From page 160, best describes what Big Book Compendium is all about. In addition to these casual get-togethers, it became customary to set apart one night a week for a meeting to be attended by anyone or everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. And so today we are at the top of page 32 in chapter 3, more about alcoholism. And chapter 3 is all about step 1. So starting the first full paragraph on page 32. Though there is no way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers, most of us could have stopped drinking. And so a career is a full-time job, isn't it? It's something I work at. I put a lot of time and effort and energy into it. And when I think about my drinking career that spanned 12 years, and I think about early in my drinking, I would have been 15 or 16. And it would have seemed pretty impossible, certainly, for me to stop drinking at that point because I was having a lot of fun. I thought it was a lot of fun and carefree and happy days, and it was all just a big laugh. And but that's my experience anyway. But the difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there is yet time, because it is that fun stage, the early days, generally speaking. As we know from our experience, and the Big Book tells us that our drinking stories do vary. They're like thumbprints, I would say. And as we know from the doctor's opinion, there's one thing that all alcoholics have in common, and just one thing, that once we start drinking, we are unable to stop, that loss of control. But other than that, the drinking stories vary widely. And that's why I have been encouraged in meetings to look for the similarities and not the differences, because as human beings, we're all unique individuals. And if I focus on the differences, I'm done, because I'm different and you're different. And I heard one of my favourite speakers one time say that if we could all unite under one banner, it would say, I'm different. And I was at my home group meeting earlier tonight. It's midnight where I am here in Perth, Western Australia. I was at my home group tonight, and a woman very convincingly said, if you think you're different, you'll drink again. That was her take on it, and that was her experience, and that's exactly what happened to her. And she described all of that for us. I'll continue reading. We have heard of a few instances where people who showed definite signs of alcoholism were able to stop for a long period because of an overpowering desire to do so. Here is one. Now, there's 4. Welcome if there's any newcomers. I know there's long-timers here. I know there's people who probably know the Big Book more thoroughly than I do. I'm no expert. I'm just one of God's children, a sober alcoholic standing in for Rach while she's away. But there are 4 prime examples of the of what alcoholism is and the insanity preceding the first drink in this chapter. So there are 4 examples, and at this first one, I put a little one inside a circle, so then it's easy for me to find it when I want to take a newcomer through, or someone who's never been through the big book. Sometimes there's people around in the fellowships who've been around a long time and never been through the big book. So the first one is a man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. And I use a colour coding highlighting method where I highlight the problem in purple just to make it easy to find again. So I just highlight that first sentence so I can find it again easily. Number one, a man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous. In other words, he was restless, irritable, and discontent. So I put RID above that word nervous, restless, irritable, discontent. In the morning after these bouts, and quieted himself with more liquor. He was ambitious to succeed in business, but saw that he would get nowhere if he drank at all. So he had some sane thinking there. Once he started, he had no control whatever. There it is. And I highlighted that. That's the problem. The allergy, and I wrote in the margin there, allergy, the abnormal reaction to alcohol. And he could see that. He saw the truth about himself. He recognized it. And he did something about it. He made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man. Absolutely an exceptional man, because he remained bone dry. And I underlined bone dry, and above that in brackets, not sober. So I guess reading between the lines, he was probably a very difficult man to get along with. He was bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55 after a successful and happy business career. Happy for who? I don't know. Again, how was his employees, his suppliers, or people he dealt with? Were they happy? I don't know. It'd be interesting to know. Is this is fictional story, or is it based in fact? I don't know. So here we go. And here's the insanity, the problem. Then he fell victim to a belief which practically every alcoholic has, and it's a delusion, that his long period of sobriety, they call it sobriety there, but we know what they mean, abstinence from drinking, and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. And we know at the beginning of chapter, it is the obsession of every abnormal drinker to prove that they can drink like other men. And out came his carpet slippers and a bottle. Excuse me, in 2 months, he was in a hospital or detox, puzzled, maybe experiencing incomprehensible demoralization at that point, and humiliated. Remember, this is a successful career businessman. He tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital meantime. Then, gathering all his forces, all his willpower, he attempted to stop altogether and found he could not. He was unable to stop. He was powerless. Every means of solving his problem, which money could buy, was at his disposal. That reminds me of Roland Hazard, but this isn't the story of Roland Hazard, because Roland Hazard had every means of solving his problem, and it took him to Europe to find the solution. So we're at the top of page 33 now. Every attempt failed. And yeah, it would be interesting to make, for me, a list of every attempt that I made at controlling and regulating and moderating and modifying my drinking, the twists and turns. And yeah, that would be a long list. Though a robust man at retirement, he went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years. Pretty tragic story. Young guy, you know, he was not even 60 then when he died. 59. That's young. I don't care what anyone says. 59's young. So very, very sad. This case contains a powerful lesson. It contains the truth. Most of us have believed that if we remained sober for a long stretch, we could thereafter drink normally. And that is a lie. I underlined all of that. And I believe that in society in general, there is also that idea. And I think even health professionals, I heard a health professional, a drug and alcohol counsellor, say to someone, absolutely, maybe take a break for a year and then start introducing it, maybe 1 or 2 drinks on a Friday night. This is the kind of insanity that educated people, not all of them, some of them are telling alcoholics. And that's the kind of thing that makes sense to an alcoholic who's in the illness, who's caught in the grip of that mental obsession and that delusion. That's the kind of news you want to hear and believe, of course. But it is a lie. But here is a man who at 55 years found he was just where he had left off at 30. We have seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. And again, some people see that kind of statement in a negative light as disempowering, but I see it as very empowering, because I need to know the truth. I need to know the truth about myself. And, I've got to call a spade a spade. If it quacks like a duck, waddles like a duck, swims like a duck, it's a duck. I have to call it a duck. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we are in a short time as bad as ever. I had my own experience with that. I was primarily a binge drinker. Granted, the longest I can ever recall in that 12-year drinking career of stopping was probably about 3 weeks. But that was enough to tell me, see, I'm all right. There's no problem. I'm not drinking every day. I'm not drinking in the mornings. I can stop anytime I want. But I didn't know the other part of that phrase. But I can't stay stopped. I couldn't see that was the problem. And I know today that's the mental obsession that was there running in the background. That was the background program that never shut off. So here's some wise words, particularly for a newcomer. If, and that's the biggest word in the big book, the biggest two-letter word in the big book. Many times when I see the word if in the big book, there's either a promise separated from a direction by the word if. The step 9 promises, if we are painstaking. These promises aren't a given, they are a result of working. So here we go. If we are planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation. And many of us circle the musts, every must in the book. And don't let anyone tell you there's no musts in AA, because there is. Someone's counted all of the musts in the big book, and I don't know how many it is, 30, 40, 50, because there are other words too that are equivalent of must, like necessary, vital, these kind of words. No reservation, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol. So that lurking notion, it's a delusion. And we were told already last week that the delusion has to be smashed. And when something is smashed, it's not getting put back together. It's getting thrown in the trash. And that's what these ideas, these reservations, if we're planning to stop drinking. If we're not planning to stop drinking, then fine. You do whatever you want to do, that's cool. So we'll continue. Young people may be encouraged by this man's experience to think that they can stop, as he did, on their own willpower. We doubt if many of them can do it, because none will really want to stop, because it's too much fun in the early stages of drinking. Teenagers, young people in their 20s, or maybe someone who starts drinking when they're 30. I've heard of women who got married young, had kids. Once the kids are grown up a little bit, they have their teenage fun when they're in their 30s or 40s. Maybe even men do it if they've settled down early and then for one reason or another are out there. So when it's fun, who's going to stop? Nobody. I've never heard of anyone stopping drinking when they're still having fun. If anyone has, I'd love to hear it. That would be interesting. And hardly one of them, because of the peculiar mental twist, the obsession already acquired, will find he can win out. So that mental obsession, that strong mental obsession, relentless, once it's taken root, once it's taken hold in the brain, very hard to beat that, very hard to overcome that. It's very strong. It's an obsession. Several of our crowd, men of 30 or less, had been drinking only a few years, but they found themselves as helpless as those who had been drinking 20 years. And that's another really important point. Doesn't matter how long your drinking career is. I've heard of a drinking career as short as 3 years. And I thought, wow, 3 years and they're already in AA. I felt quite envious and jealous of that. And yeah, it kind of puzzled me, but there are other people that drink for 30 and 40 years, and I don't know how they survive that. But everyone seems to drink exactly as long as they need to before they are brought to surrender by King Alcohol. So the last paragraph on 33, to be gravely affected, one does not necessarily have to drink a long time, nor take the quantities some of us have. Exactly what I was just talking about. This is particularly true of women. Potential female alcoholics often turn into the real thing and are gone beyond recall in a few years. And that person I was recalling who had a drinking career of 3 years was a woman, and her story was in the monthly AA magazine in Queensland. I think it's called the Pathfinder. It's funny how certain pieces of information just stay with you, certain details. Certain drinkers who would be greatly insulted if called alcoholics. So sadly, this book was written in 1939 and still 2025, there is that stigma. Why would someone be insulted if you called them an alcoholic other than there is stigma, misunderstanding, are astonished at their inability to stop. We who are familiar with the symptoms see large numbers of potential alcoholics among young people everywhere, but try and get them to see it. So we're at the top of page 34. As we look back, we feel we had gone on drinking many years beyond the point where we could quit on our own willpower. If you had a pencil and you wanted to put a little tick anywhere you identify with something, I would have put a tick right there. Because, yeah, my drinking went on. I look back, there were a couple of certain markers that went, okay, why didn't you stop there? Why didn't you stop there? That was pretty clear. But nope, just had to keep on going. If anyone questions whether he has entered this dangerous area, let him try leaving liquor alone for 1 year. And I've heard people say that in meetings, to someone, okay, you're not an alcoholic, great, just try not drinking for a year. If you're not a person who's a non-alcoholic will, I believe, in my opinion, easily go through a year without drinking. But for the alcoholic, much harder, though it can be done, like the man of 30. I mean, he was bone dry for 25 years. So just the reason that somebody can stay dry without a program doesn't mean they're not an alcoholic, as we can see from that example, that story, which I call number one example. If he's a real alcoholic and very far advanced, there is scant or little chance of success. In the early days of our drinking, we occasionally remained sober for a year or more, becoming serious drinkers again later. Though you may be able to stop for a considerable period, you may yet be a potential alcoholic. We think few to whom this book will appeal can stay dry anything like a year. Some will be drunk the day after making their resolutions, some of them within a few weeks. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question of how to stop altogether. We are assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. So the question has been asked of us twice here in these 2 pages. Do you want to stop? And I've sometimes met with people and I ask them that question. Do you want to stop drinking? It's a yes or no question. It's very interesting the responses I get to that question. really incredible and imaginative, creative stories, dramas, problems, explanations. I'm asking a yes or no question. There's no judgment in it. There's no nothing. I'm just curious. Do you want to stop drinking? We've been asked that twice. The big book is asking me twice here. Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he has already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. So is that mental obsession in play or not? And is there degrees of mental obsession? Does someone have it stronger, or can a person have a stronger obsession at some point? I don't know. Curious. Many of us felt that we had plenty of character. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. Zero. Unable to do it. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it, this utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or the wish. And as we'll see from the stories coming up, often alcoholics, whether they're working twice as hard as everyone else to prove themselves or what it is, but often alcoholics, and I'm generalizing, intelligent, talented, skilled, the number one in their field, all that kind of stuff. I've known a couple of alcoholic painters in the fellowship. I had my house painted by an alcoholic painter, and a superb, absolutely top rate, perfect paint job. Unbelievable. This paint job was done maybe 10 years ago, and it really still doesn't need redoing. So yeah, what is it? What is it that someone can carry out their work, business, other duties, or other activities out to such a high degree of skill, expertise, but still picks up a drink again, even after what happened last time? So the baffling feature, and the last paragraph on page 34. How then shall we help our readers determine to their own satisfaction whether they are one of us? How do we help someone diagnose themselves? The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render an even greater service to alcoholic sufferers and perhaps to the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking, for obviously this is the crux of the problem. So the core or the center of the problem. What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Why does he? Of what is he thinking? Right? It just doesn't make sense to a moderate drinker, a social drinker, a non-drinker. Plenty of people out there in the world choose to not drink just because. Health reasons, religious reasons. They just don't want to because they don't like the taste. So many reasons. So if they can do it, why can't we? Why can't she? Why can't he? But I'm just going to double back a little bit. This idea of suggesting to someone, great, you might not be an alcoholic, but how about you just do this experiment if you want? See if you can stop drinking for a year. Because so many alcoholics, well, that first page of this chapter says it's the obsession of every alcoholic. No person likes to think he's bodily or mentally different. And I think about my approaches recently to newcomers. I think I've fallen into a bit of a trap of thinking, yeah, they're an alcoholic because they say they are. And yeah, they want to get sober. They're in an AA meeting. Not necessarily so. So I'm certainly going to remember that as a different approach, as another approach. Okay, so number 2, the second full paragraph on page 35. I've put a number 2 there, even though it says our first example. This is just the way I do it. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, or you're right or wrong, or anyone's right or wrong. It's just how I do it. Kind of doesn't make sense, but it makes sense to me because we had man of 30. To me, that's the first example. And number 2, I call it, our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. And I highlighted that first sentence. just in purple, so that I can easily find it if I need to when I'm flicking through my book, talking to someone, sharing, and I want to show them what's in the book, not just what my experience is, but I marry those two together, my experience and what's in the book. This man has a charming wife and family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He had a commendable World War record. He's a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He's an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. He's restless, irritable, and discontent, which I wrote RID, above nervous. So he's a little bit unstable. He did no drinking until he was 35. So again, I'm curious. I'd love to know, why didn't he drink? How do you get to 35 and not drink? Lots of people do, though. I've heard it lots of times. It's just different to my experience, that's all. In a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. On leaving the asylum or the rehab, he came into contact with us. So that sounds like a Jekyll and Hyde thing to me, because one minute you've got this charming, lovely family man that everyone likes and he's likable and he's a good guy and a good salesman. Everyone likes him, and suddenly he's so violent that he's got to be locked away. We told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer we had found. He made a beginning. Maybe he did steps 3 and 4. His family was reassembled. Okay, sometimes families are too quick to jump back in when they don't have the full knowledge of this severity of this problem and how grave it is and what the solution is, and how much effort the solution takes if a person wants it. And he began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. So he's had a fall from grace. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. So I did a cross-reference there to page 15, which is one of the absolute key of 14, the bottom of 14. Faith without works was dead, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if the alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life. So I guess mainstream thinking would be, how do you perfect and enlarge your spiritual life? Hours and hours of meditation and prayer and going on a retreat, Buddhist monastery, that kind of thing. But what this tells us, because it's this program of action, spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others. There's the direction. The warning then tells me he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead if he did not work. There's a warning. And if he would surely drink again, and if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. So I've actually got a whole bunch of cross references here, but I'm not going to go into them. That's just my favourite one, the main one, page 14, 15. So back to Jim. He failed to enlarge his spiritual life. He wasn't working with others. He's probably focusing on, meeting his sales targets. To his consternation, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him. So they were working intensely with him. These guys were not going to drink because they were working with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. He agreed he was a real alcoholic and in a serious condition. He knew he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. Moreover, he would lose his family, for whom he had a deep affection. On to page 36. So he had a desire to stop, and he had very motivating factors there, his family and children and wife, and he was willing to listen, yet he got drunk again. We asked him to tell us exactly how it happened. And I certainly find that listening to newcomers, listening to people who've relapsed, I hear everything I need to hear. I just learn. I know what I need to do from their stories. That is valuable stuff to me. This is his story. I came to work on Tuesday morning. Yeah. Okay, where was he on Monday? Doesn't the work week start on Monday? So he came to work Tuesday morning. I remember I felt irritated. Yeah, irritated. Was he a bit hungover? I don't know. That I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned. Not good for a prideful, egotistical alcoholic. He may have been born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and suddenly he's got to be a salesman for the business that he used to earn. Resentment. He probably had resentment right there. That's what it sounds like. I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious. Would have loved to be a fly on the wall for that conversation. Then I decided to drive into the country and see one of my prospects for a car. On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. I had no intention of drinking. Yeah, okay. I just thought I'd get a sandwich. I also had the notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place, which was familiar, for I'd been going to it for years. I had eaten there many times during the month, so I was sober. Let's say abstinent or dry. Doesn't sound like he had any real sobriety. The way we know it through a 12-step program anyway. I sat down at a table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Still no thought of drinking. I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk. At this point, he's still sane. He's thinking sanely. Now, here we go. This next half a dozen or so lines are in italics. We know when something's in italics, pay attention. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. Just like that, he slipped into full-on insanity. That's just insane thinking, but he thinks he's okay. I ordered a whiskey and poured it into the milk. I vaguely sensed I was not being any too smart. So here's a man, this is just my take on it. There's no conscious contact with a higher power. He's not been restored to sanity. He's driven by the obsession. He's got a vague idea, a bit very hazy. He's vague, but felt reassured as I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. So another lie. He's believing his own lies and in the grip of obsession and delusion and insane thinking. The experiment went so well that I ordered another whiskey and poured it into more milk. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another. So the allergy has kicked in now. He's been driven by the unquenchable thirst, the phenomenon of craving. He thinks he's making these decisions. Oh, yeah, I think I'll have another one. Oh, that one was good. I'll have a third one. No way. He's been driven by the compulsion, craving. The craving has been triggered. Thus started one more journey to the asylum or detox for Jim. Here was the threat of commitment, the loss of family and position, to say nothing of that intense mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused him. And we're back on italics here, the last two lines of page 36. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic, yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favour of the foolish idea or lie that he could take whiskey if only he mixed it with milk. I'm just having a quick look at another cross-reference. So on page 26, those last two lines on 36, I just wrote a 26 next to them because over on page 26, it's about 12 lines down. So 5, 6 lines up from the second full paragraph. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. So talking about self-knowledge. Self-knowledge is all well and good, but it's not going to be enough to keep someone sober or away from that first drink. Let's continue on the top of page 37, first full paragraph. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. And it's clear to us. We're here, we're sober, we're sane. It's clear to us, but for a person that's caught in the grip of this fatal and grave illness, it all makes sense and these ideas seem plausible. How can such a lack of proportion or of the ability to think straight be called anything else? So the inability to see the truth, lacking sanity. You may think this an extreme case. To us, it is not far-fetched. For this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences, but there was always the curious mental phenomenon, the obsession, that paralleled with our sound reasoning. There inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Maybe not even insanely trivial, but some difficulty, some loss in life, some problem. A person who's in the grip of obsession, it's going to be something small like a broken shoelace, or something very difficult and sad like the death or loss of a loved one. But, you know, with a sane and sound, rational mind and logical thinking, you wouldn't pick up a drink because it's not going to bring that person or pet back. It's not going to change anything. It's not making anything better. It's just going to make things worse. But when someone's caught in the grip of that obsession, it makes perfect sense. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. The insane idea won out. And the insane idea is to pick up that first drink. Next day, we would ask ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity, how could it have happened? And it is incomprehensible. In some instances, we've gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, or the like. And these are just excuses. Excuses which seem to have a plausibility. And for people who are non-alcoholics, who might be able to have a drink or two to take the edge off when there's difficulties in life, they may not understand that an alcoholic can't get away with that. We just can't do that. It's not going to work out. But even in this type of beginning, we are obliged to admit that our justification for a spree was insanely insufficient in the light of what always happened, which is exactly what I was just saying there. The cost is too great. We now see that when we began to drink deliberately instead of, or as well as casually, there was little serious or effective thought during the period of premeditation of what the terrific consequences might be. And I've heard other people in AA share that consequential thinking isn't going to work for an alcoholic. If an alcoholic's caught in the grip of that obsession, you can't, your alibis are going to be stronger than any potential consequences you can think of. That's my understanding. So, okay, we're up to example number 3. So I put a little 3 in a circle ahead of the next paragraph. Our behaviour is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion or obsession, say for jaywalking. And my God, I can remember the first time I read this, I absolutely loved it. I just thought it was hilarious. I thought it was brilliant. And I identified with the jaywalker. And now you've got people out there with T-shirts that say Jaywalker on them, which is pretty funny. So let's hear the story of the Jaywalker. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, you would label him as a foolish chap having queer ideas of fun or weird. Luck then deserts him and he's slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal and had sane, sound thinking, to cut it out, of course. Presently, he's hit again, and this time has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. It tells you he's decided to stop jaywalking for good, but in a few weeks he breaks both legs. On through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he can no longer work, his wife gets a divorce, and he's held up to ridicule. He tries every known means, distractions, gym, trying to find Mr. Right or Mrs. Right, moving, geographicals. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. So he probably would have tried a geographical from, New York to Los Angeles and found out, oh my God, they've got trolley cars there as well. He shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to mend his ways. But the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? You may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who've been through the ringer have to admit if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects, where alcohol has been involved, we've been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true? And certainly Jim was intelligent in many respects, except he kept on drinking, even when he was stood to lose everything that was dear to him in life. He still continued that experiment of the first drink, driven by his obsession. Some of you are thinking, yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. We admit we have some of these symptoms, but we have not gone to the extremes you fellows did, nor are we likely to, for we understand ourselves so well. There's that self-knowledge again, third time, after what you've told us, that such things cannot happen again. So a different level of insanity and delusion comes in, and a different set of lies. We have not lost everything in life through drinking, and we certainly do not intend to. Thanks for the information. And even recently, I've heard that story in meetings many times where people have listened, heard a few things in a couple of meetings, 2 or 3 meetings, and the insane idea, I'm all good now, I know what to do. Yikes. Ouch. So people go out and gather more experience. Of course, Henry Ford said, experience is the thing of supreme value. And on to page 39, first full paragraph. That may be true of certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have not been damaged as ours were. But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be, it's in italics, very, very important, absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. I just love this text so much. It's just so clear. It is so clear. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize to smash home upon our alcoholic readers, as it has been revealed to us out of bitter experience. So it's not theory, this is what they went through. Let us take another example. And so that point there, unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge, that's just a very key point, absolute key point in this text. And let's go on to the fourth, number 4, Fred. So this is the story. It was in the first big book, and the story is called A Different Slant. Was that the shortest story in the book? 1.5 or 2 pages or something. And I believe it's the story of Harry Brick. But in here, the name was changed and we call him Fred. He was a partner in a well-known accounting firm. So again, a man successful in business. He's a partner in an accounting firm. His income is good. He has a fine home, is happily married, and the father of promising children of college age. Right there, anyone in the mainstream would look at that person and go, oh God, no, well, he can't be an alcoholic. I mean, he's a partner in an accounting firm. He has a lovely home. He's not some homeless bum lying in the gutter. This guy can't be an alcoholic. Next. And here we go. Here's more about Fred. He has so attractive a personality that he makes friends with everyone. If ever there was a successful businessman, it is Fred. To all appearance, key word, appearance. Maybe he's a bit of a chameleon, wears some masks. Maybe he's an Academy Award-winning actor. To all appearance, he's a stable, well-balanced individual, yet he is alcoholic. I'm actually loving this more and more. I've got a confession to make. I haven't been seriously in the big book recently, and wow, have I been missing out. Yeah, I do have a new sponsee, so we just need to get serious and start digging into the book. This is just brilliant. We first saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he had gone to recover from a bad case of jitters. It was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed of it, riddled with guilt, shame, and remorse. So above ashamed, I put GSR. Unfortunate acronym or initials, because GSR is an important service position in AA, but in this context, he was riddled with guilt, shame, and remorse. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, because no one likes to be bodily and mentally different, he told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. The doctor intimated or hinted strongly that he might be worse than he realised. So I wonder if maybe that was Dr. Silkworth. I don't know, because sadly, many doctors don't recognise alcoholism. I had a doctor when I got sober, and I went to get a medical certificate. I wanted a couple of days off work so I could go to some AA meetings. And she said, oh, well, I told her about my drinking. She said, oh, a lot of uni students binge drink. And I thought, wow, just because a lot of people do it doesn't mean it's okay. And it doesn't mean that I'm not an alcoholic. It's too long ago. I tried to get her to come to an AA meeting, but I don't think she was that interested. And probably in those early days, I don't know, I was probably a bit too full on. Anyway, for a few days, he was depressed about his condition. He made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. He was going to use his willpower. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so. In spite of his character and standing, Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic. Yeah, because look around. The house, the car, the beautiful wife. I'm not an alcoholic, no way. Have a look down at that park down there on that park bench. That's an alcoholic, not me. Much less accept a spiritual remedy for his problem because he's been very successful in the material world. We told him what we knew about alcoholism, so they carried a message of depth and weight to him. He was interested and conceded that he had some of the symptoms, but he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about it himself. He was positive that his humiliating experience and fear, plus the knowledge he had acquired, there's that self-knowledge again, would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it. some reason that makes me think of the little boy whistling in the woods. He's doing the same thing. He's sad. It's very tragic. I sometimes I don't want to make light of it. It is very, very sad and tragic. It's a heavy, heavy topic. We heard no more of Fred for a while. One day we were told that he was back in the hospital. This time he was quite shaky. He soon indicated he was anxious to see us. The story he told is most instructive, for here was a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking, who had no excuse for drinking, who exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all his other concerns, yet was flat on his back nevertheless. Let him tell you about it. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink, but I was confident it could not happen to me after what I had learned, self-knowledge. I reasoned I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows, that I had been usually successful in licking my other personal problems, and that I would therefore be successful where you men failed. So he had a pretty healthy or unhealthy, oversized ego and pride. I felt I had every right to be self-confident, that it would be only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. In this frame of mind, I went about my business, and for a time all was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks and began to wonder if I had not been making too hard work of a simple matter. So the memories of his drinking and the shame, the embarrassment, the guilt, shame, remorse, was all just fading. He can't bring to his mind with sufficient force the suffering of weeks or, a month or even weeks ago. He's got that mental blank spot, and he's forgetting. One day I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. We're at the top of page 41. I had been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so he wasn't sober, dry. So there was nothing new about that. Physically, I felt fine. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. So no excuses to drink, no alibis, no rationalizations or justifications about why he should drink. Usually alkies have a lot of these tucked up our sleeves. My business came off well. I was pleased and knew my partners would be too. Classic line in the big book. Love this one. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. We've got some italics here, so let's take NB, nota bene, extra attention to this. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all. Nothing more. I ordered a cocktail and my meal. Then I ordered another cocktail, and after dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball would be fine before going to bed. So again, he thinks that in his mind, he thought a highball would be nice, but it's this craving that's driving him now, that obsession that led him to pick up that drink and believe the lies that his mind told him. Once that first drink is in, he's got no say in what happens anymore. So I stepped into the bar and had one. I remember having several more that night and plenty next morning, so it ended up in an overnight bender. I have a shadowy recollection of being in an aeroplane bound for New York and of finding a friendly taxi driver at the landing field instead of my wife. The driver escorted me about for several days. I know little of where I went or what I said and did. Then came the hospital with unbearable mental and physical suffering, that incomprehensible demoralization. How did this happen again? I really thought I had it this time. Just look at me, look around. As soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time I had not thought of the consequences at all. I had commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. I now remembered what my alcoholic friends had told me, how they prophesied that if I had an alcoholic mind, the time and place would come. I would drink again. So I'm just going to jump right to the bottom of page 43, and Rach will get to it next week. I just think it would be good to read this and then read it again. The last paragraph on page 43, last paragraph of this chapter. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. No husbands, bosses, accounting firm partners, nobody, police, courts, judges, can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. So I'm just going to jump back to 42. This man recovering from this horrendous bender. Top of page 42. They had said that though I did raise a defence, it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink. Well, just that did happen and more. For what I had learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment that I had an alcoholic mind. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. I had never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow. And so there's a paradox there. And so next week we will start at a brilliant place. Two of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. We'll start off there next week on page 42. But this, the problem had him hopelessly defeated. That sounds bad, negative, sad, but that's actually fantastic. If someone's hopeless, beaten, surrendered, no more fight left in them, that's brilliant, because a higher power can then come in. So he wouldn't have known at the time. He said it was a crushing blow. And I only knew in hindsight that the demoralization that I felt coming into AA as a result of my drinking and everything I'd done, that was the best thing that had ever happened to me, that I was finally almost dead, survived long enough to get to an AA meeting, how dark it is before the dawn and how bright the sunlight is when we come to in Alcoholics Anonymous and embrace this incredible way of life. So thank you, everyone, for listening. I will stop the recording and looking forward to your shares, comments, questions, and instruction, perhaps. I'm not usually here due to the time of day, but thanks again. I'm going to stop the recording.